Okay.
Today we're speaking with Elias and Ethel Siegle Aler at their home on Ridge Road, and they share their memories of South Brunswick with us and give us a little history of their family and why they located here and why they still stayed here. Okay? Who wants to start? You were here the longest, or?
Why we lived here and why we stayed here, you think?
Why you lived here and what you did growing up and where you went to school.
Well, he worked here most of his
and
life.
your neighbors.
Yeah, my neighbors happened to be, oh, did I move out of
A little bit, that's right. Okay, we're right.
I'm
Get
not
comfortable.
used to the camera being on me. I lost my red hairy locks that I used to have before. Everybody said, how come they call you Red? And I said, I don't know, it just carried on from a nickname. But I used to have fiery red hair at one time. Yes, a lot of times, like I live here near Joe and Ruth, and Ruth's mother was teaching me in school when I went to school, and just I don't know, when we got married, I lived in Monmouth Junction. I was born in Monmouth Junction and lived in Monmouth Junction.
Where were you born? Which home were you born in? Which area?
Well,
He was born
if you're
in
going
Dayton.
across, if you're going to, let's see, I was born in Monmouth Junction.
Oh, yeah?
My grandfather and grandmother
That's what we want.
used to live, when you go across the swamp, that first house now on the left-hand side, they used to own all that property. They used to own across the road, and it used to be a big farmhouse.
There's a foundation in there. You can still see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now that
Going out towards the park on New Road.
Okay.
yes, yes,
In Monmouth Junction.
yes,
That brand new home that's built there now?
yes. It's across the road from that. There's a foundation there yet. There's an old iron bed, and there's a well.
Well, then
There.
it's by the park, Sundeck.
Well,
Yeah,
it's before you get to
to
the
the
park,
park.
say 1,000 yards from the park on the same side. Now, what happened, they used to have a real big farm there, and they had a lot of horses. They had cows, and they had a lot of other things that, go with the farm. A big farmhouse. Now, I don't have any pictures of farmhouse or anything. A lot of this stuff burnt up. What happened in Monmouth Junction at that time, and a good many people know it that lived around there, and probably, maybe you can remember, that when they had the old steam locomotives going up and down the railroad, every once in a while, the firemen would be firing these old steam locomotives, and they would have a screen in them that keeps the sparks from coming out. And every once in a while, one of these screens would burn out, and these hot sparks would come out. So if you get the right wind, and you had a lot of fields, that time wasn't plowed, and if everything was dry, what we call Indian grass. Indian grass grew up a certain height, and when it was dry, that really went like gunpowder. And one night, they used to call it, before you come to Turkey Island, when you go up the railroad towards Plainsboro, the Turkey Island Road, well, maybe a quarter of a mile or a half a mile before you come to Turkey Island Road, going south, one of these sparks came out, and it set the fuel on fire. And it was such a windy day, and the wind was blowing maybe 30, 40 miles an hour, and it went across the field, across the woods, across the swamp, and burnt everything up. And they had a chance, they just about could get out themselves. Burnt everything, the cattle and everything up. It happened in the nighttime, and it went so fast that they lost completely everything. But they was able to get out, and my grandmother always was one of the type, like all the old people, they did a lot of canning. They just completely lost everything. But the old iron bed, and I was in there not about a year ago, I guess, and they were just scratching around. And I see still little pieces here and there are still there. Now, I'm sure that the people, if you just turn right around on the side of you there and see that old picture there on top,
Yes?
this is exactly where that house is now. That's the farm that my grandfather had there. That is exactly the same spot. It's at the field. My grandfather used to plant all kinds of vegetables and things, and then he used to go by wagon to New Brunswick. He had chickens, he had eggs, he had milk and everything, and sell it to the people in New Brunswick. And then he'd come back again. That was like a 2-day trip, you know, but that's how he made his money. And that was my grandfather there, the oldest one standing up, and my father and my brother. I'm not in that picture, but that's the way they made the money.
Now, Red, where did your grandparents live before, and what was your grandmother's maiden name?
I don't know. I don't know that. But I can say this, that after the house burnt down, that they bought a place over in Mama Junction. I don't know if you remember where that was, where Ems's store used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So there used to be another, and
Right.
it was another house there where Louis Bosenberry lived in there for a while.
Right, my mother's family lived in there for a while, the Ryans.
Yeah, and well, they lived to the next place. It was on the side of it.
Oh, okay, there were two in there then.
There was two in there, yes. There used to be a road, because there used to be a barn and everything to
Right.
where my grandmother lived. And my Uncle Louis used to do some farming and things. He never worked, he knew nothing but farming. So he used to have the old one-horse plow, and your tires round in your back and you plow. And that's where men were men. You
Right.
know, I mean,
Now, your mom was a Bosenberry,
my mother was a Bosenberry, yes.
right?
And so my grandmother had a store there. She had ice cream and cake,
I remember
pies,
that scene.
and everything
Bosenberry?
she had in there.
That was
You
Grandma
remember that?
Bosenberry.
Mm-hmm.
Grandma Bosenberry.
I
and she-
remember Louie, I don't remember
Yeah,
her.
well, this was Louis's mother,
Okay.
see, because Louis was my uncle.
Mhm.
And she used to have an old, big old chunk stove, and then they had a couple pool tables. And the people from the railroad, they used to go to Mama's and things, they used to get off and have to wait for the train.
To go down
And
the
so they used to
shore.
go over there and eat, and or have tobacco, like
Mm-hmm.
cigars, cigarettes, whatever. And she used to make these homemade pies, homemade cakes, you know, and things like that. And I never will forget. Some things in your mind always stands out when you're a kid, you know. And I was pretty young at that time. This guy, the name of Bill Finchel, he never was married.
Mhm.
He lived around the Y,
Around the Y, back there
towards
by-
Noble.
right,
Right,
mhm.
back to
Carried
Noble.
his wooden water
Right.
pail,
Bill
right?
Finchel used to be, never was married and everything. And I don't know how this man did it, but he used to come in my grandmother's place, and he was one of the best customers. And he used to get these pies. And she, you know, them pies, them days, you know, weren't like they are today, an 8-inch pie or a 6-inch pie.
They were
You know,
pies.
they were like an inch and a half high, I
Mhm.
think, and this guy, man, used to sit down and eat a whole one.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah, he was a big man. Yeah.
he used to eat like nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just couldn't get over it, you know, how he did it.
That was Fred Fenchel's brother,
Well,
I think it
Brother?
was, yes, it must have been.
or uncle,
Yeah,
brother,
yeah,
I would say
yeah,
brother.
Yeah,
You're thinking of Fred was a big man.
Oh, Fred was a big. Okay.
yeah. So that was, now of course all these places are ripped down and everything, but that's what I can remember about that part of it.
Mhm.
And another part of it is that in Maumee Junction, which then once I was a kid, we had no money. My parents were lucky to give us something to eat.
Mhm.
And I've seen my mother cry because there wasn't enough to eat in the house. And
How many of you were there?
well, she lost two when my mission, and that used to be Hunt's house then, and then Shuppy bought it later. you know, down back of where the Presbyterian Church used to be,
Right.
down the lane there.
Mhm.
But Hunt owned that house. Hunt owned both of those farms. There was a farm there, and then up going south, there was another farm on the other side of the road. So that was owned by Hunt also.
Now, that's the farm that you grew up on, it was kind of down the lane from our house.
Yes,
Yeah.
Right.
yes, I could
Okay.
see your house. And
So how long, were you born in that house?
no, I wasn't born in that house, but I was born in Molly Junction, but I don't know whether I was born in my grandmother's place or not. I'm not sure there.
And who owned that farm back there?
Hunt
Hunt, okay.
owned the two farms.
Would that be Elston Hunt's
Mother.
Mother? Mhm.
Mother. And then you're going up a ways, going towards Plainsboro, and then the next house on the right-hand side, the farmhouse, they own that farm also.
I remember that.
Yeah,
Was that
they
that
owned-
farm?
And there used to be, when we lived there used to be a crossing that goes across the railroad.
Mhm.
And when you want to cross the railroad, you used to come out where Doss lived,
Mhm.
Mhm.
there in the corner at that time.
Pictures in it, you have a picture.
Mhm.
Yeah, Doss lived
Right.
there. And then, of course, if you went on up Hungry Hill, well, the houses are still on Hungry Hill.
Mhm.
but, you
That
know,
didn't change.
That didn't change at all. And another thing is that was very outstanding I remember your father very well working in the garden. He was very hard working, very hard carpenter. And looking at you brings back things too to me. And I remember your George.
Yes.
When George was in the garage hammering that nail that time,
Mhm.
and the nail jumped out and went in his eye.
That's right.
And what? In his
He was 12 years old.
See?
12.
I remember that. I remember your grandfather
Grandpa
used to be
Ryan.
living with you.
Oh, that would be my great-grandfather.
All right. So I remember him when he was,
Grandpa Larry.
yeah, when he lived there, and I remember your father was always working. If he wasn't working on his job, he'd be out in the garden.
Mhm.
And of course,
Well, you had a big garden up there, too.
well,
yeah.
my father did all the work because we were small, pretty small.
Now, how many in your family, Red? I don't remember.
Well, let's see. There was Doris and Tilly and 3 boys when we
Pearl?
lived there. Well, she was out of the house at
Oh,
that
yeah.
time. I'd say 5.
Mhm.
5 at that time. But we had nothing. We did a lot of hunting and we did a lot of fishing.
Where'd you fish?
Where did I fish? That was a good question.
Not telling?
It's to go fishing. I'm glad you brought that up. Today you have a monofilm line, you have a spinning outfit, you have a nice pole and everything. It's easy. Them days, we loved fishing. We used to go to my mother and steal her black thread, which she had for a overhaul thread. So take that. And for a while, we was using a pen, a safety pen, and just open it up and catching fish that way. So then later on, we went down to Emmons, the store. Emmons had everything in that store.
Mhm.
And he knew everybody in town. And he was an awful nice man.
Yes, he was.
Mhm.
He was a nice man. He knew we didn't have no money. And then we knew we were looking in there, looking at that, looking at this. And he says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah." I says, "We'd like to have some hooks, but don't have no money." And he opened the box up and he gave us each one some hooks.
See what you remember?
We were just as proud if somebody gave you today
Mhm.
all the fishing gear there was and laid them there, you wouldn't be any happier.
Mhm.
And I tell you, that's just the way it was at that particular time. Then we used to go down and we used to travel from my house to Dean's Farm, walk down along the railroad,
Mhm.
go fishing.
Mhm.
There was a lot of fish at that time. Go from my house to Kingston, walk, start in the morning, come home at night. And we used to have a lot of fish. But if you went into...
Nothing to eat either.
And we had a small brook or anything. you could catch fish because everything, all the water was not polluted.
Right.
You could drink the water.
Mhm.
If you got thirsty, you could drink the water was there. You don't even know what pollution was. I remember your grandfather was, speaking about fishing, something comes up in your mind all the time. Your grandfather used to go down to the reservoir
Uh-huh.
and back at the railroad station. The reservoir, I don't know, I think you remember
I
that?
played there when I was a kid, and I fished there, and I swam there,
Okay.
and, yeah.
So, he used to go in that one corner nearest the depot, and he fished there, and he fished for catfish and eels. He used to sit there with a lantern, and I remember him very, very.
I still have that lantern.
Yeah, you still do?
Yep.
And he was a nice man. He used to stay there. Jack Ritter used to. We wasn't supposed to swim in there.
Jack Ritter was the ticket agent.
He was a ticket agent. He used to. He knew he wasn't supposed to allow us kids to do it, but we used to get an old plank somewhere and build a diving board, And that's where I learned how to swim in there. You swim or drown.
Yeah.
there was no feet on the ground.
You learned to
because
swim
you'd have
quickly.
to have a 20-foot foot or leg. so anyway, thinking about that, my younger brother Harl lived down there. He was small. I was very young too. He wanted to go swimming, and I said, "Well, come on along." I said, "I got an old inner tube," and I figured he didn't know how to swim nothing at all. So he was floating around this time in an inner tube. He had his can in the middle and his arms up, chest, and the sun was shining, the legs over top of the inner tube in the water, floating around. And all of this is 20 foot deep. There's no such thing as taper.
Right.
It was made there for water. And a snake curled up on his chest. And he looked down like that, he felt that, and he looked the snake right in the eye. It was a water moccasin, And all at once I heard the splashing. Boy, the water fine. I said, "What's the matter?" Look, I was there, and he made it to shore.
He learned to swim.
he never knew a thing about swimming. I never will forget that. But there used to be snakes in there.
Yeah.
There was quite a few snakes.
You don't see snakes around anymore,
There's still quite a few around. Like at my house, I have a brook behind my house and a
Oh,
pond.
yeah?
Yeah, there's snakes in there. Sometimes there's 4, 5, 6 of them.
This field used to be loaded with snakes when, before Dow Jones.
Another thing I would like to tell you, which is a story that probably maybe does repeat today, but not in this area, is they call it, when you went up to where Sam Noble and them lived around it, they call it the Y.
The Y,
Yeah,
right?
the Y.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so you go around the Y.
Back of
There
the
was a water
station.
tank there, right there. And around the Y, there used to be a lot of railroad cars going down to first Amboy or South Amboy, and they loaded them on boats and things like
Mhm,
this.
mhm.
Soft coal.
Mhm.
Many, many, many times the trains are going. So one time, there was Jake Noble, and I forget, Jake was the crippled one,
I think
I
so.
think so, yes.
Yeah.
but his brother Frank, I think Frank was the other one, his older brother,
Right,
Frank.
Frank.
He went to high school, Now anyway, we were very young, and I don't know what, maybe 10 years old, maybe a little old. They used to have refrigerator cars parked along there for waiting for orders or something, maybe like 20 cars. They used to park on a siding there.
Mhm.
And at this particular time, Sam Noble had a boarder there or something that got hurt. And I think it was Frank. It had to be Frank because the other he couldn't be up on the boxcar. They used to have a walk on top of the boxcar, a plank walk.
Mhm.
And so we were playing tags. There was about 4 or 5 of us up there playing tags. We were going down to Noble's to take this iodine. He had bought a bottle of iodine, I don't know where, it must have been Emmons' store. So I was running after him, trying to catch him. And of course, when you're a kid, boy, you can go, And there was a spikes sticking up on top of one that worked loose, went up about an inch or 2 above the plank. I caught my foot in it, my toe bars,
By the
where the
knuckle.
couplings are. and I hit that coupling with my head like that and just laid it open. I was not knocked out, but I fell that right straight down, and if you look close enough, you can still see that round curve. I didn't know anything. I mean, I wasn't knocked out completely. So the only thing I can remember is that Frank had this bottle of iodine, that he was going to take to his border. See, I didn't know I didn't know how bad I was or anything. So I ran down. We was almost down that far anyway, and I ran down to Sam. Sam Noble was his father. Sam speak very broken English at that time. He looked at me, and this thing was laid open, and I would have probably been scared if I could see it myself. He said, "Get the hell out of here." He says, "Go to the hospital." He says, "I can't do nothing." He said, he scared me, you know. At that particular time, you know, that's just the way people were, you know. Well, it wasn't nothing he could do, and I guess he'd seen that it wasn't nothing. He didn't need it.
I thought that's what he was going to say. He put that iodine in.
No, he didn't. He said he panicked, and he said, "Get the hell out of here." He says, "Go to." He said, "Go to the hospital." I'm a kid. I'm a mile from Mama Junction almost, you know. And here he really put fear in me. At that particular time, I was all blood. I ran, and I ran all the way back to my grandmother's place. My grandmother had the store there, and I just had it, you know. And there was somebody there with an old Buick. Put me in a car, and I was bleeding as much as I was. There was no such a thing as an ambulance. You couldn't get a doctor or anything. Took me into New Brunswick. And in there, they sewed me up, and of course my parents didn't know anything about this. But I was so lucky that I had somebody, because I would have bled to death.
Was that Middlesex Hospital they took you to?
Yes.
Now Robert Wood?
I was not used, yes, I was not, of course it was just a little bit of a thing at that time. I was not used to being away from home. So I heard the train blowing on the railroad. And I said, if I can get out of here and I can go where that train's blowing, I can go home. I'll find my way home, because we lived by the railroad.
Right.
Okay? This is the way I was thinking. So I said, geez, there wasn't nobody around. I jumped out of the bed, and all would lose my blood. I fell on the floor. I couldn't get up. I was so weak. I couldn't get up. There I was, you know, laying on the floor, and I just couldn't get up because I didn't have no strength. And then, of course, the nurse come around and asked me what I was doing down there, you know, and I wasn't going to say I was going to try to get out, you know, to go home, you know. But anyway, I had to stay there overnight, and then later on my folks came down, and it was quite a way that you had to work, but there's a lot of different stories you can tell that went on. And then I remember another fellow, speaking of the trains and thinking of the trains, that they used to hook a ride, and they go to Dayton, used to go to Jamesburg, and I can't remember his name anymore, and his foot slipped underneath the railroad car, the wheel, and cut it right off. Cut it off at that particular time. I can't remember his name.
Now, where you went to school, Monmouth Junction?
Yes.
And you went to the school down on New Road where the first aid is, or did you go to?
No.
You went to?
No, I only went to Monmouth Junction, and then I went to Princeton with your brother, but I didn't finish.
Were you in Sterl's class?
I was in George's.
George's class.
I was with George. We used to go to Corb's Lucas and the garage, and it was Julia Murphy, Joe Kozacek, and George and myself. We used to go there, and Corb used to come out, and he used to start the bus up, and we went from there.
Did you pick people up on Ridge Road?
Yes, yes, but there wasn't that many that went to school at that time. There wasn't too many who went to high school. And later on, I quit, I think it was in the second or third year, so, and I had to go to work.
So now where did you go to grammar school? Yeah.
I went to Dayton.
You went to Dayton.
yes.
And was this Monmouth Junction School there then?
It was there, but see, my parents moved.
They lived by the hay press, you know where the hay
In
press
Dayton.
is?
They live in Dayton.
My parents
Okay,
lived in Dayton
okay.
and they moved to Monmouth Junction, so
All right,
I started in Dayton.
okay.
And I just don't know how long it was.
So you didn't go at school in Monmouth Junction at all?
Yes, I went to school in Monmouth Junction. I was maybe one year to Dayton School, and then my parents moved to Monmouth Junction, and then the rest of the time I finished off in Monmouth Junction.
Who were your teachers?
Mrs. Weaver and
Mrs. Free?
Mrs. Free. Yes,
Did you like her?
yes, yes.
George didn't.
I,
Do you have any idea why?
I like her. Huh? I
Do you have any idea why George wouldn't like
No,
her?
I don't. I remember she was strict at that time. I remember there's always things that you used to do. Somebody, one time, the kids used to come in with different things they try to get out of school, and they used to take and see a dead skunk or something on the road,
Oh, God.
and then rub their shoes in there or something.
Oh,
And then they go to school, and the teacher would smell it, you know, and say, you used to go in the cloakroom, you know, at that time. And they would keep you in there so long, and after a while you couldn't stand it, you know. Then they'd have to let you go. But that was one of the tricks that they that sometimes they used to have.
So you didn't finish Princeton, but you went to work. Where did you go to work?
I went to work in by a plumber's apprentice, and I was working in for Orton and Cranberry.
That would be in Princeton, the apprentice went to,
I went to in Cranberry, and Cranberry is where I had to go to the shop, and worked there. And then later on, at that time you had to work 5 years to be an apprentice, and it was $18 a week for 9 hours a day, 6 days a week. That's exactly what it was. So I got married, and later on I got married, and I said, well, geez, I can't live on this, you know. So I asked him, I was doing all the work and everything for him. And Mr. Norton, I said, I'd like to have a little more money. I said, I'm getting married. He said, I can't give it to you right now. So I quit him. I worked for him. I was doing the work.
what was that man's name?
Mr. Orton. Orton.
Orton?
Yeah, my brother-in-law bought his business out, Gene Herr.
Gene Herb is your
That's my
brother-in-law.
brother-in-law. Gene worked for him also, and then of course he bought it out. And
Still has that business. He still
Yeah.
has, yes.
Gene
His
passed
son runs
away,
it.
but his son runs
son
it.
runs
now.
it.
Yeah, his
Yeah, he
son runs
passed
it.
away a couple of years ago, I think, something like that. And when he wanted to be laid out, he wanted to be laid out in work clothes because he never enjoyed anything but work. And he couldn't, there was no other way that he could enjoy anything.
Well, he built a nice business.
Well, he
Wow.
was an orphan.
Was he?
Yeah, he was an orphan for a good
Gene-
many years.
Gene was a conscientious man, and if he couldn't do A+ on everything, he wouldn't tackle it. He had to be A+. I know when he was working around him or something, when you did a job in a basement or wherever it was, them copper pipes had to be polished, and they lacquered. You could see your face, and most of the work was done in Princeton. And these people wouldn't want nobody else but him. And after he took that business over, he had a thriving business. And he had it mostly in Princeton. And some of these people, most of them had butlers and maids that he was doing the work for. And so after I couldn't get a raise over there, because at that particular time I was getting no vacation, and I had no holidays. If you took a day off or anything, that was it, you paid for it. And your work, there was no ditch digger. You dug a pick and shovel. You wanted to dig a hole, go through a foundation, chisel, a sledgehammer. And so I went to work down in Levy. That's when I quit and I went to work for Levy. Instead of getting, I think it's 35 cents an hour, I started with like 65, almost double. And boy, was that a big difference for me. The company, and then 30 years, I finished off with Dow Jones.
Mhm.
I put 17 years in Dow Jones.
Did you?
Yeah.
Mhm. Your neighbor?
Yes, I'll show you the plaque I got here. After they didn't want me to go. I was 68 years old when I left.
Well, he
And-
wanted to move to Cincinnati, but I wouldn't move. Because, see, I had a brother living with me, you know,
I remember
Michael.
your brother.
You do?
Mike,
Remember? He lived with me for 45 years, you know. And we just built this house. It wasn't too long before we built this house.
about 37 years.
And I figured didn't want to move there. I didn't know nothing. And he was sick because he worked in all those chemicals
Right.
and everything. And every morning he gagged and everything. And I thought to myself, he's not going to Cincinnati if I have anything to say. So I said I wouldn't go. And my daughter said she wouldn't go. So he changed his mind. I says, well, if you want to go try it, go there yourself. And then if you like it, then maybe you'll decide. Well, he never did go. Those bosses begged him and everything. He never went.
Now, Ethel, you were
No.
born in South Brunswick?
I was born in Dayton.
Dayton.
Mhm.
Whereabouts in Dayton?
Oh, it's on Culver Road. The house ain't even there anymore. Yeah, there was 6 of us. And
Why did your parents locate in Dayton? Do you have any-
well, my mother and father lived in New York, but then 2 of the kids got run over in New York, and my father said to my mother, we got to move out in the country because the kids are getting killed. So they moved out. It's as you cross that railroad there going towards Culver's, you know, well, that on the right where they have that big building, well, it used to be a lane.
It's just a little past that to the
Yeah,
left.
it used to be a
There's
lane
for
and it
sale
used to
sign
be a
there.
house, nothing
back.
fancy. Because my father died and when my sister Sophie was born. She was 2 weeks old when my father died. And my mother raised the 6 kids by herself. So what you call that's where I lived.
Her
So when you
father-
married Red, you worked in...
Well, see, I knew Red from a kid because he used to run
Really?
around with my brother Mike all the time.
Okay.
They used to go fishing all together, and when they lived in Hapers, they used to go past the house and always stop down the house. So he was down the house all the time, you know, because they were for good friends for a good many years, you know. But
Yeah, Ethel's mother came from Austria,
Mhm.
and her father came from Russia.
Mhm.
So she doesn't know her
I
father.
don't
She's never
even
seen him
remember him.
because they died. You know, I mean, he died way before the kids can remember too much.
So you went to school in Dayton,
Yeah,
and
well,
who were some of your classmates?
Mrs. Green.
Was a teacher.
And then, Virginia Landis used to be, I don't know if you remember her, but she was a Landis. I went to school with her. And who else did I go to school with? Not many of them left, tell you the truth.
Do you remember some of the names?
I don't know, too many left. Even Virginia's gone. I used to work with her and
I mean, do you remember their names? They are gone.
one of the nobles, but there were so many nobles, I didn't know
Yes.
which one it was. You know, there's so many of them
And you
there.
went to high school?
I went to Jamesburg for a couple of years, and then I had to go to work.
Did you go with my sister Betty? Courtney? Betty Brapson?
Well, Betty's much younger than I
Okay.
am, because I'm going to be 78 in December. So she was
Yeah,
much,
she was younger.
yeah, she was much younger.
So the Dayton children
Went to
went to Jane. You
Jamesburg.
went there all 4 years?
No, I had to quit because I had to go to work.
And where
Yeah.
did you go to work?
Oh, I went to work in a dress factory in New Brunswick on Church Street, you
And
know,
how did you go to work?
walk.
You lived with her sister?
I lived with my sister and we walked all the time.
She lived in New Brunswick.
Okay.
Her sister
Yeah.
did.
All right.
And
She was
then,
married.
what you called, I lived there. But then weekends I used to come home to see my mother and my sister, Sophie. She was the one that's a lieutenant colonel. She retired as a
I
lieutenant
remember
colonel.
Sophie.
Mm. I guess you must be close to her age, ain't you?
69.
Well, I guess
She
you
was.
might remember her because, she's 75.
I've probably read about her or something.
Yeah. So, she lives in Florida now.
So you got married and married
Well, we lived in Holland Park
Highland
for about
Park.
a year, and then we rented this house, and I was gonna buy that house, but Miss Emmons owned it, and she wanted more money. I wanted to give her $500 less, and she argued and wouldn't sell. So when that house on Hungry Hill was up for sale, I says, we'll buy it. And Red says, I'm not going to buy it because I'm going to build a new house. I says, you can build a new house, but not right now. I says, buy this one, and then when we get on our feet, then we'll build a new one. Well,
Now, who lives in that house now?
Kilbride.
Kilbride.
Yeah.
And then the
Irv
Facebook.
We
Kilbride
sold it
bought
to
it. We
him.
sold it to Irv,
Mhm.
and Irv passed away, and they got divorced, and I don't know his wife.
I don't
is
even
down
know
in
where
Florida.
Then you built this house and moved here.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's going to be
Yeah.
38 years in
Yeah.
March that we moved here.
Yeah.
And that's when Levy was thinking about moving to Cincinnati.
Yeah,
So
right after.
we went to see my sister Sophie in
Rantoul, Illinois.
Rantoul. She was stationed there. She was in charge of a hospital. So we went there, and they were talking about Cincinnati. So Red says, I'm going to stop in Cincinnati and see what that ink plant looks like. Well, we stopped there, and nobody ever knew that they were going to move. It was a
They didn't tell 'em
complete
about it.
secret. So the boss took Red and showed him the plant, but I couldn't go there because I wasn't an employee of it. So the secretary says to me, sit down and have a cup of coffee with me. She says, are you going to move to Cincinnati? I says, are they moving? She said, oh, that's for sure. So I was the first one to find out
had to
that they
find
were
out.
moving.
We had to
She
find out
wasn't
from them.
supposed to tell me, but she told me, you know. And I says, I don't know, we're thinking about it. I wouldn't tell her that I didn't know
Right,
because I
right.
figured I wouldn't get her in trouble, you
Right,
know.
right.
But she told me right off the bat that they were thinking about moving.
Well, it was probably good that they moved.
So,
Oh,
To
it
get
was,
the factory from here.
it was a blessing.
Yes.
Because, see, you put it this way, if you work 30 years for a place, and you get 5 weeks vacation, and you know everybody, it's like a rut.
Mhm.
You get in a rut, and you're not going to get out of that rut. The only way you're going to get out of that rut, somebody's got to put a bomb underneath you, or light a fire underneath you, or something. And this is what happened to me. It was the best thing in the world that ever could happen.
Mhm.
Because I didn't know anything different. Because I didn't want to give that 5 weeks vacation up.
Right.
But the way it worked out, boy, it was, I figured I took a little loss when I left. But in a couple of years, I made that up real quick. And boy, it was a mutual thing because with my experience,
Mhm.
and I had my boss was, well, when I first went there, my boss was like 30 years old or something. And you know, he had the schooling and everything, but boy, you need a lot more than that today. And than that, the schooling. So
You knew the field work.
I tell you, it just worked out real good for me because I was up in such a thing that I didn't feel like quitting because, like I said, I was 68, and when I mentioned leaving, they didn't want me to leave.
they used to come and see him in Dow Jones, try to talk him to go back and move. Everybody wanted him back. But I said, no, we're not going to move. But you know, I made a lot of decisions in our life. A damn good thing they turned out good. I just wonder what Red would have said to me if they were all wrong. Because first of all, I made that decision about that house. Then I made that decision about the damn job, which
Yeah.
gave him the job. The boss of the cafeteria came up to me and said, boy, I need a man band. He says, you know where I can get a good man? I says, yeah, I can tell you, you hire my husband. He says, what's your husband do? I says, well, he's the boss in maintenance. He says, that's just the man I want. So I says to him, he said, went upstairs and got a application. Red filled it out, and next day he says to me, he's hired. He didn't even need him, and he hired him.
Uh-huh.
But like I say, it's a damn good thing the decisions were good, because I don't know where we would have landed if they weren't.
They turned out good.
But everything turned out for the best that time. And after he quit Levy, he felt much better.
I think a lot of people did.
Yes.
You know, that
Yeah.
was a terrible
Yeah.
place to work.
Yes.
A lot
I
of
re-
red dust.
It
And,
was, oh, it was
Yeah.
bad.
I remember Stirl one time, I met a place open, you know, and I was talking, and I asked him, he was going to New York that time, remember, he was
Yeah, he had to commute at
Yeah,
55.
so I met
he had to
him
start
there, and he
commuting.
said to me, you know, Ethel, he says, the only one that made good was when he quit was Red. He got the best job of all the people that worked in Levy. He said the rest of them just didn't get no jobs that amounted to anything. He said Red was the only one. I said, it's a damn good thing he did, because I would have never heard the end of it. But they're nice in Dow Jones. I'll tell you one thing, if anybody works for Dow Jones, but they tell me they changed a lot. It's not like it used to be. I don't know.
People,
The bosses changed, you know, and everything is money now, that
Right.
where before it used to do a lot of things that they didn't think of money, you know. But now it's a little different. But it turned out to be good. We'll be married 58 years in June.
God
wow.
bless you. Many, many more.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's life, you know. I don't know what else I would say. I know
Well,
there's
you've
many,
seen
many things
You've seen a lot of changes, and
that I see a lot of changes. I guess we did.
I think the biggest change of all is the people today. I think when you go down and look at the little kids, the way they're brought up and everything, there's a
Nobody
lot
told you
of-
to come down and get a drink, huh?
You know, there was another thing too. You know, that when I was small in Mama Junction, there used to be a lot of trucks going through Mama Junction. These old Mack trucks with a big chain on the wheel, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And what I don't know how true it was. At that time was probation, and they was carrying. They said it used to be the bootleggers carrying, you know, on a truck. Well, we never knew that, you know. But what happened? Well, when you were kids, you know, we used to go out. There wasn't no traffic on the road, and the only thing when these trucks come, and there was quite a few of them. And we used to, in the wintertime, when the snow was on the ground and everything, we used to get in the hole on the back of them and go all the way maybe to Dayton. You know, and we used to take a ride that way.
were you in the service, right?
Yeah, but a very short time. I got deferments from where I worked almost to the end of the war.
Your brother Bill served quite a long
Yeah,
time.
my brother got,
Yeah, I remember when he came back.
he
Yeah.
it was a shame about him because nobody went to bat for him. And he was one that kept everything to himself. He never wanted to complain or anything. And he was an outdoor man. But what happened to him, this is Roosevelt said at that particular time on the radio, there will be none of our boys leaving for foreign soil. See? That's what he said. And he was already in
He was
Iceland.
there.
He was in Iceland. But that's a politician for you.
Right.
Now. And what he did when he got over there, he's supposed to be in engineers or something like that. And then they was loading these Russian boats up over there, and they was working them like till they dropped them. Also put heavy boxes on, and plus the weather there, you know. I think he got something on his neck. He got something wrong with his neck.
I
It
remember.
went around this way, and he come in back in this country and went in Harron, there was a Staten Island, there was Harron or something, hospital over there, and we went to see him. I hardly knew him. And his neck was like that. He was going outside and everything he had to do was this way. He never got anything from the vets or
Not a
anything.
pension or
Not a
nothing.
penny.
Yeah, that's terrible.
And there's a man, most of them get anything today are BSers. That's all they are. They just go and they know a politician or something, they get it. And there's nothing wrong with them. And if you watch them work around a house or something like that, you see, but he never.
He certainly deserved it.
Yes. But so he passed away a few years ago.
Well,
And
Red, there were some good memories and some bad ones.
Yeah.
Mostly good ones.
mostly good ones, yeah.
I can remember. Remember the old church over there, people going to church.
Yes. Yes.
What kind of What church was that?
Presbyterian.
Presbyterian.
Oh, that was a
The
Presbyterian?
Lookers and the Pearsons
Yes.
and the Emmonses and
And Mrs. Emmons was a
Hutchinson's.
news reporter. She,
John Setro bought it.
right.
They bought it out.
Mhm.
And of course, you know, the big surprise was Bud Huber. You know, Bud was always like a Charles Atlas,
Yeah.
you know, that lived next door.
Oh, yeah, yeah, he always had his sleeves rolled
Yeah.
up.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, he was our best man when we married, because he used to walk down and to the back of the house in the wintertime. And I always had to put a coat on, you know, winter
Right.
underwear.
He was
And he would come
skinny.
down there and hardly anything on.
Yeah.
Holy Christ, you know. I know you're big and husky and everything, but Jesus, how the heck can you go in that cold? And he was a Charles Atlas.
Mhm.
He was a Charles Atlas, and you'd think he was a #1 for his health. But he was working for the magnetic pigment down there at that time in the back over there, and he was a painter. And who knows, there's a lot of chemicals there,
Yeah.
believe me, and you get in some of these vats and some of these machines and everything, and don't know, but
You think there's a lot still there, Red?
Oh, you never get that stuff out of there.
Um,
No
they
way.
ripped the buildings down and everything, but I don't know how much is there. That would have to be going over good. I do know that they have where the Levy used to be in that area. They have wells around it, you know, certain place. But I can tell you one thing, it's been 20-some years ago that they used to make a bromine red down there. And
Everything was red.
bromine red. Well, this is also the red oxide from the magnetic pigment. I'm speaking now of Levy. They made it for printing inks. And the red oxide was made for other things. That's a magnetic pigment. There's
Lipstick.
two separate ones. And there was a certain amount, I see something running out over there on the side, and it was like a greenish yellow, still coming out of the ground.
And they're thinking about putting senior citizens there, aren't they?
But I guess they figured the chemicals can't hurt them.
You gotta get to school.
That's
Yeah.
one way of looking at it.
I don't, you don't know how much is around there and how much, it would have to be
Well,
going
let's
over
see.
real close.
How many years are you retired?
I'm retired 10 years, and it was 20 years I put in there, so it's 30 years ago I'm
Yeah.
thinking of now.
But that was a dirty place.
Yes, it was.
You know, when he retired, it took him 6 months to get all the blue and
You
the
know
red
that
out of
Dr.
his
Tim
pores.
Basie, remember him?
Yes,
at
Yes.
Kings, or Kendall Park?
Right.
I went there for a physical one time, and he says, "Where do you work?" He looked in this ear, and blue, and one red, and another one, or looked up my nose and says, "Where do you work?" And I told him, down the lead. He said, "You better get out of that place," he says. I mean, you know, they tell you this.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of people, Dr. Tim Basie, he was a
Yeah.
nice man.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
I liked
Mhm.
him.
I did too. Yeah.
So, little by little, you know,
Well, you've done very well.
Yeah.
it's, yes, I can't complain. I worked hard, but you know, and we had lived in the back there for all these years until I was 21. We had no electricity.
No
And no
bathroom,
water,
no
no
nothing.
bathroom, that was outside, and you didn't spend no time in there, you know.
Yeah, but when you think of it, it
You'll see
didn't
the
hurt
whole
him.
catalog.
You know,
was
he's
there.
better educated than the ones that have everything. You take a young couple today that gets married. Mother and father buys them a car, a house, and furniture and everything. They got everything. They live a few years together. Let's divorce, and that's the end of them. You know? But when you work for something, you appreciate
Right.
it, but they don't.
I never
do they?
regret one day of that living back there with that. I never regret it, no.
Probably
because
had
I
more
know the
fun
difference.
than ever.
When I got married, I figured when I was on my own, the best thing I was going to have is heat in the house. When I got up in the winter time, I used to go to bed with my socks on, you know. to keep
Now
my
I know
feet-
why you were a plumber.
And I said, one thing I want to have is heat. And we do. We have plenty of heat now.
We got married June the 1st, and you know, it took me 2 weeks to tell him take his socks off. He'd crawl in bed with his socks off. But that shows you how you're raised up, you know, it sticks by you.
I never regret it. It was,
But I was glad that I was raised like that, because at least you know the
Appreciate everything.
value of the money,
Right,
and
right.
whatever you have, you appreciate it.
it was, cut wood. My father worked hard cutting the wood. It was mine behind the stove, filled up with wood for the night. And also cut the kilns. And cut the kilns, it was chestnut wood.
Wow.
Now chestnut you don't see no more, it's gone, disappeared. But the reason why I use chestnut is because you could split real easy and it was split straight. It wouldn't be like this. And so my father used to have a certain amount of, and I used to have to go on a chopping block over there and chop it up in real small pieces and bring it in for my mother. She used to be the first one up in the morning to put it in the stove and start the fire up, you know. That's the only way you could do it. So one day I was cutting that and I missed it and I cut this finger almost off. You can see the scar.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
See that? I took it in and never went to a doctor, and all the bone was halfway out. My mother took cobwebs and wrapped it up in cobwebs, and then she put something else on it and put some plain, like a cheesecloth or something, and wrapped it up, and I still use it today.
Isn't that so?
So,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, things like that. And we used to get snapping turtles out of the swamp. They had, them days, those big snapping turtles. And he used to carry them, boy, they were heavy, a big head on them, you know. And my father used to take and pull the head out and they cut it off. And my mother made soup out of it, snapping turtle soup. It was like chicken. It tastes like chicken.
Very good, yeah. It has something like roast beef in the back, too.
Yeah, it's just like chicken. You wouldn't know the difference. So then my father used to say, don't never pick that head up. Don't never touch it. He used to bury it right away. But he showed us kids, never, if you ever do that. And it was laying there about an hour, and he stuck a stick in there to show us, and that come down on him, and just like that, it would cut your finger off on that stick. That thing was still the nerves or something, whatever was in there, but he did show it that much, you know. But all these things that, you know, you don't see of today. And if you went skating or anything, you had to pick a skate out of the dump somewhere where somebody threw away. That was the old clam skate. You used to have the
You
clamps on it.
only have one.
And then my father didn't like that because he used to pull the soles off.
I used to bring snapping turtles to Jim Kimple.
To who?
Jim Kimple.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, when I was a police officer.
Yeah.
I used to catch snapping turtles on the road and stuff like that, and I'd bring them over to Jim Kimple, and he'd take
He
them,
eats them?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
But the thing is, most of the time he's been out in Wisconsin, I guess, in the summertime
Oh,
now.
yeah, Minnesota.
Minnesota,
Minnesota,
yeah. I know somebody's out there.
Can't.
And every time his wife said he's gone, so then I would take it. There was a black lady lived over on Broadway Road, and I used to take them over to her, and she ate them.
Yeah.
Mrs. Mitchell?
No, Mrs. Gibbs or
Gibbs.
Gibbs.
Diggs.
Some people used to eat raccoon too, you know. My brother used to get raccoon. People used to come there and buy it, you know. But I don't know of anybody that eats it today. And they eat everything like muskrat.
Were you a trapper, Rick?
My brother was a trapper.
Harold?
No. My brother
Willie.
Willie, the one
Willie,
was
yeah.
hurt.
Down in the swamp that we called it.
He was really a trapper. I mean, he made all his just money, spending money, what he had. He smoked and bought his cigarettes and stuff. And he used to have that thing made here with a wrap around and hold his head a certain way. But he was a trapper. And the reason why I say he was a trapper, he knew these swamps from one end to all the way to Plainsboro.
Knew where the huckleberries were, huh?
Well, he knew where the tucker.
He knew everything.
I trapped, but nothing nowhere as near like my brother. And when you catch
Well, he
mink,
didn't work that
if you
late,
catch
did he?
mink was oh man, that was really, really high price at that time. Muskrats was good, but mink was more. But you got to be smart to catch a mink because they know the smell. They can smell. I mean, for a day after you're scent around here. And my brother used to have certain with gloves, you know, and then he have certain scent he put around. And I remember one time just before Christmas he caught a black mink. And a black mink was really scared. That was a lot of money, a black mink, when you sold a fur at that time.
Where would he sell them?
There used to be Perrine from Cranberry. He used to come, he was a fur buyer. And there used to be more than one fur buyer used to come around to your house. And if you didn't like what one gave you, you could wait and call another one up. But people come around because there was a big demand for fur coats.
Mhm.
And what you had to watch out for fur is a certain time of the year, they mating season, and when the mushrats they fighting, and when you have to turn it inside out, and the skin is on the outside, and you put it on a board to dry.
Right.
This is where you could see the cuts, and they would cut down half on the price or something like that. You have a beautiful rat there, beautiful fur, but these cuts they would cut down, and he used to catch fox. My brother used to get fox, red fox. He used to have a dog, Spider, his name was, and that dog could go pick up a coal scent, and boy, he was good. And my brother used to, not one thing there about it, my brother was a trapper. I said he had like a machete sometime to cut steaks with. And I never forget, like Spider, one day in the woods, in the thicket of woods somewhere, like they call Turkey Island up there is a real thicket back up in there. And he went to cut a steak one time, and a spider ran in underneath it. And he come down with a machete on his back. And boy, he cut that thing wide open. And he come and he didn't do nothing to it, put something on it at home, but didn't do nothing, the dogs lived. But I never figured he would live. But he used to catch a lot of fox too.
Really? The dog?
We used to have,
The dog, see, when the
Well,
dog,
did he shoot the fox?
he shoot at the fox, and there was a bounty on him at one time,
Right,
you know.
right.
And when you shoot the fox, of course, the dog would come up, you know, to it. But there was many fox at that time. My uncle used to be a great fox hunter too.
we had fox here before Dow Jones moved. I raised 2 little ones.
Did you?
We used
Yeah.
to feed everything here.
I used to work in Dow Jones, and a lot of times they had leftovers, so I would bring the food there, and I put it by the clothes post. And every night this one fox would come. And one day she brought 2 little ones.
Uh-oh.
But you know, when she ate, when those little ones ate, she never took a bite. She just laid there and watched them 2 little ones. Now when I see how those colored and white people treat those babies, I always say to Red, look at that fox, how she looks after the little ones. And the mothers today, what they do with their kids, it's a crime, you know?
Now you have turkey and
Yeah, well, we
turkeys
have turkeys here.
turkeys and deer, right?
Yeah, I feed them. They come right here underneath the tree.
Yeah, we had 14 one
14
day.
turkeys.
Wow, 14.
I saw a flock of them on the other side.
Now this year,
Okay.
we haven't had any yet, but on account of the construction here.
Uh-huh.
But
When the trucks
Ruth
were-
has seen them down there by the woods somewhere, but they haven't come over here at all. Well, there was one thing I want to ask you. When you lived over there in that place, you remember when they had these wrecks on the railroad? And they used to be like, one time I remember linseed oil.
Everybody in town had linseed oil, right?
It was like a lake, you know. Let's say a 6,000 gallon car rolled over, you know.
Well, do you remember they called it the Nellie Bly? Do you remember that one? That was down farther
No,
past, closer to Dean's.
no,
It was a passenger and a freight.
I don't remember. Probably do a long time, but I just can't.
But I
remember.
remember the oil one.
And one time there was one with Mazola oil.
Right?
That was right in front of our house, and it was the 5-gallon cans, and people were running off.
Everybody had them.
Everybody running over with 5 gallons of that can. And I think another one time was oranges. Come to think of it, you know, you could keep right on going on. But Louis the Long Ears, we called him when we were kids. He used to be a great swimmer down in the reservoir, and I think he lived with the Sabiskis. You remember Mike Sabisky? He lived up on Hungry
Right,
Hill.
right.
The Sabisky, and then they moved. Anyway, there used to be railroad sidings. They used to put these cars filled with watermelons. And so they used to go in there, and in the end, there was like for the air to go in, you know, in the watermelon. And Louis used to go in there and pick out 2 or 3 watermelons. It was parked up there, nobody bothered him or anything. They used to go up and go in there, and they was missing too much or something. And and the detectives come around one night or something like that. But Louis was in there passing out the watermelon, and he passed it to the detective. I mean, years ago,
Yeah.
there wasn't too much of this.
Right,
You
right.
never expect it, you know. And he said, the guy said, that's enough. They never done anything to him, you know, at that time, just warned him, you know.
Yeah.
But that was enough.
But they
I
don't
never
have the
forget.
kind of crime we have
Right.
today. though.
Yeah, right.
They did little things like that, but nothing like they have today in a township.
Then thinking of that too, because they used to have hobos,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the hobos used to come on, and they used to be starving. These men were starving. They're not the kind that goes in a soup kitchen today. They don't need. They got a
didn't have
big
no
belly on
soup
them.
kitchen.
No, it wasn't. These guys were hungry. I mean hungry, and they come up and want something to eat, you know. So if my mother was around, I'd try to sneak something because my mother used to make bread. She used to make bread, and we used to get couple piece of bread and put something in there, whatever she had, you know, and take it. I don't care if it was just a piece of bread. Them guys appreciated it.
My mother used to feed them.
You used to feed
My
them,
mother
yeah?
used to, yeah.
But they always kept saying that they put a mark.
Yeah,
They're
there
by-
they
For the
came back.
next one, to let all their buddies know where they got their bread.
But it was, and then it's like my father used to go along the railroad and pick these belts that comes off the train, like a refrigerator car or something. I don't know what kind of car they come off of, but he used to. That's what he put on our shoes for leather, you know. And he used to have that iron thing you put
We
up there.
still have that on the
Yeah, I still
fireplace
got it, yeah.
downstairs.
Yeah, and
That was from his father, so.
put the shoes with the belt, and you couldn't wear that out.
Mm.
Only way you got rid of it was when you went ice skating, like I said, with the clamps, and you twisted your foot.
Yeah.
That was the difference. Yes, and one thing it was the people were nice.
Oh, the people
The
today
people you
are
didn't have to
terrible.
lock you didn't have to lock the house.
Right.
We didn't know what locking the house was. Didn't know what it was.
No, but the people were friendly. You never heard of neighbors fighting and things like
They
they do
helped one
today.
another.
God, at that Princeton gate or something, they're always fighting. One put a tree up and the other one didn't want the tree or something. Little things that don't mean a thing, you know, they
Right.
fight over.
We didn't have anything, but I'll tell you one thing. We had, for Thanksgiving, my mother used to cook for a week. I mean, she made pies. She made cakes. She made everything, and everything from jars. And she always had people over, like my uncle came over, and the place was full of people, and they all sat down and eat. And plenty to eat, you know, anything you want, and the food was delicious, you know. And they had no refrigerator, everything was a pantry, you know, they put a pantry. We used to like to sneak in there before Thanksgiving. But boy, I'll tell you, that's when the broom came in. Or when the bread was raising, and we used to jump around and make the noise and stuff. That bread, boy, she'd get out, she'd get mad, and I don't blame her, you know.
Yeah.
With all them loaves of bread she had, and then the thing was coming up, you know, with yeast. And then the only kind of drink we got was this old root beer. That time you get them in a jar,
My dad used to do that.
and you make the root beer, and she used to put it in the jars, or the bottles, with a cap on it, you know. And sometimes out in the sun she put it, and it would get so much pressure to pop, even pop the damn thing out. She bring it down, made always a lot of root beer. That's what we drank. Was like, and that we thought that was great.
Yeah.
It was good.
Christmas time, if we got an orange in our stocking, we were lucky. You know, we were happy. We were happy, very happy. And the news, I remember when the old battery set came out, that they had the old battery set for a radio. Geez, you just get them old programs on, Amos and Andy, and all them really old, lot of them on. Boy, that was a big thing. You come in there, boy, what's on tonight, you know? That was when the crystal sets disappeared and the radio came out. You know?
Sure you remember old Poppy Dye and Jim?
Yeah, you know, you brought up something that always comes back. I wasn't the youngest one in the family, and I wasn't old. I was in the middle. But my mother, she was always healthy and everything, but then she got a lot of pain. She was in a lot of pain, and Dr. Smith was a doctor over there. then he was doctoring, and then sometimes she just couldn't, she had so much pain she couldn't take it. And there was no telephone around or anything. The Di on the corner had a telephone. And she had such pains, and she couldn't stand up. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning or something, and my father didn't know what to do, and all the rest was sleeping, but I was a worrywart. And I
Still
worried
are.
about it. And I am yet, yeah. So anyway, I ran up there, and I knocked on the door, and yeah, he came out, and I said, Jesus, I said, my mother's awful sick. I says, I was just wondering if we could get in touch with a doctor or something. I said, she got terrific pains. And he said, sure. So he rang it up and doggone it, he got the doctor at that time. And that doctor came out. I mean, that doctor...
Dr. Percy?
Not Percy.
Ivan.
Huh?
Yeah,
Dr. Ivan.
Yeah,
No,
the first
yeah.
one.
No,
Dr. Percy was first, and then Dr. Ivan Smith came.
That was the first one.
No,
Percy.
no.
Dr. Carl.
I'm thinking of
Carl.
I'm thinking of Dr. Carl was before
Dr.
Smith.
Carroll.
By the-
Dr. Carl, that's
Right.
what it
Yeah.
was, Dr. Carl. He's the one. And he came out and he said, oh, he's pushed around. And he said, no, since he couldn't do nothing, he gave her something.
Well, she had
And
gallbladder for
then
years.
we took her down to, the next day we took her down to, what was his name?
Clark.
Clark.
Surgeon.
Dr. Clark. He cut her open, he said, I have to, and she had a gallstone in there big as a chicken egg almost. Inside. You know how much pain that must be. And she was so run down at that particular time, it took a long time to come back. But that's how I remember him. He was so nice.
Yeah, well, there was usually one phone in the block,
Yeah,
on the street.
yeah.
Did you have a phone when you was a kid?
I can remember using the die phone, my mother using the die phone, but I can remember our first telephone number was 130.
Oh, you got her,
130.
oh, yeah,
Yes.
how about that? But I remember going up there, I was scared to death that night, and I thought she was going to pass away. You really...
Well, Dr. Clark was very good.
Yeah, oh, Dr.
Oh,
Clark.
yeah.
He had a very good name in the Brunswick.
Yeah.
And then, when my mother was 70-some years old, 73, 74, she took her there, and back up there, and he removed her whole breast. And she came out of that all right.
She had cancer, but
She
it
had
wasn't malignant, it was the other
Yeah.
kind.
It's good.
And he
She-
says, I took her there, and he says to me, you must be her daughter. I says, I'm not her daughter, I'm her daughter-in-law. Well, he says, I want to show you something. I thought he was going to show me something interesting. Here he took her apart and says, look at that. He showed me the stitches on her thing. Well, that almost made me sick. And he was so proud of that operation that it really amazed me to see how proud he was. You know, the stitches and how it healed up and everything. But he was a rough guy, but he did a good job.
So much then.
You remember him? You remember
I
him?
can remember the name. Thank goodness we didn't.
Well, she had 2 operations by him. She
Yeah.
had the gallbladder and she had the breast removed. And she was old then, I guess about 71, 72 years old when she had it. And she lived for almost 10 years
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah.
But today, the way they go to the doctors, they have, and you know, it's so different. And like I say, the people are so different today. It's hard to believe that they are raised up like that. I hate
Yeah.
to see what the young generation's gonna amount to when they
Well,
grow up.
No,
Okay. Tony has an appointment, so we
Oh,
Oh.
we could
Yeah.
talk all
oh,
day.
it was very nice.
Same here.
Very nice.